In Warhammer 40,000, where there is only endless war and no moment of tranquility or peace, no one would want to be or live there, except for one faction, the Orcs. The Orcs are one of the only species that love living in that universe. They enjoy it and wouldn't wish for any other place to be. I'm not sure if Warhammer Fantasy counts here, but anyway, the Orcs have a pretty simple style. Everything revolves around war, or more precisely, what war means to them. These guys may seem foolish, with little intelligence in most cases, but they are quite resilient, strong, and come in large numbers to the point where they are called the Green Tide. Although often regarded as comic relief or just an enemy of the weak until the real threat arrives, one mustn't forget they are one of the longest-lived and most widespread races in the Milky Way. They can also be quite sinister. Just look at the events of the Beast and the fate awaiting those captured during that time. Therefore, they shouldn't be underestimated, because once they reach your planet, they become a green sea of destruction that won't stop until everything in their path is destroyed. History. Let's start at the beginning, and that beginning was over 60 million years ago, give or take a few million years, when one of the most apocalyptic and devastating wars in the history of Warhammer 40k broke out, known as the War in Heaven. This war would make the cybernetic revolt and even the Horus heresy seem like mere preschool disasters in comparison to the storm that arose, where the Necrons and their gods, the C'tan, clashed against the Old Ones, who were space frogs, and their psychic creations, which included the Elder and the Orcs, now known as Orcs. When they were first created, the Orcs were taller than a Primarch. Their basic units had far superior armor and weaponry, so much so that the weaponry of the current Imperium would be considered obsolete or primitive, plus they had full control of their psychic powers. I'll discuss this trait more later. Even with all this, they couldn't stop the advance of the Necrons and their new weapons, which could stand against the Old Ones and their allies or creations. Once the Old Ones were exterminated and their creations nearly wiped out, a rebel lion broke out among the Necrons, who turned against the C'tan for revenge, but that's also another story. Let's just say that to achieve immortality, a very high price was paid, which ultimately led to the Necrons' resentment toward their gods. After the Necron civil war, and weakened by the restored forces of the Elder and the Orcs, the Necrons went into slumber to wait for the major threats to extinguish themselves. So, with no immediate threat, the new races took control of the galaxy and did as they pleased. The Elder, with their excesses, and the Orcs, without a stronger species to challenge them, began to fight each other, and the Elder simply because they were bored. Over time, the Orcs began to limit themselves, or, more simply, nerf themselves for the sake of the plot. So, with no worthy species or a challenge that forced them to improve, they began to devolve into the Orcs of the 41st to 42nd millennium, but that's getting ahead. Throughout millions of years, the Orcs were in endless war with anyone in their way, and often against themselves. As humanity entered the scene and began to expand, their first alien contact was with the Orcs. And more Orcs, who they quickly learned the hard way were vast and dangerous, losing several colonies in the early years. However, as humanity and its technology advanced, Orcs became merely a nuisance, to the point where the Orcs themselves no longer wanted to fight them because they found it boring and pointless. Everything was peaceful and calm, relatively speaking, as the so-called Golden Age of technology was not so golden, and the term Dark Age would fit just as well. Everything continued until the events of the Machine Rebel Lion, or rather, the Cybernetic Revolt, when the Men of Iron rebelled, and the entire galaxy burned in cybernetic fire. After the war, humanity was greatly affected, developing a deep fear of AIS and losing all technological advancement. Also, warp storms arose due to the birth of the fourth Chaos God, isolating human worlds and leaving them at the mercy of anyone, including the Orcs, who seized the opportunity to seek battle and loot. This era was known as the Age of Strife. When the Emperor emerged, and the Great Crusade began, the Orcs posed a severe problem, requiring many Marines, including the Primarchs themselves when situations got out of hand. But the most important campaign against the Orcs was the Ullanor campaign, where warlord Erlik and his great Waaagh forced several legions, their Primarchs, numerous Imperial army regiments, Titans, and even the Emperor and the Adeptus Custodes to participate. In that battle or war, the warlord himself might have defeated the Emperor, but he was saved by Horus of the Heresy. I mean, Horus. Once the campaign was over, it was believed that the Orc threat would only be a minor annoyance. Big mistake. Let's skip over Horus's attempt at conquest with his allies and his later retirement of the Emperor, or rather, the Horus Heresy and the Emperor's subsequent confinement on the Golden Throne. 1,000 years passed, and during that time, the Imperium was in relative peace. That is, there were few Xenos threats, or they were insignificant. The traitors were in their internal wars, and the Black Crusades had not even arisen. They were in a lasting peace until a great Xenos invasion appeared, which was later discovered almost immediately not to be an invasion but rather a flight from something. The Imperial Fists discovered a great Waaagh, attacking the Imperium everywhere with attack moons, artificial planets created by the Orcs, which, by their mere presence, could destabilize a planet or nearby ships due to their gravity. The Orcs were so cunning that an Orkoid ambassador appeared to demand humanity's surrender, speaking fluent and elegant High Gothic, on Terra. This war was extensive, but suffice it to say that the Imperial Fists were exterminated, and the legion that appeared later was rebuilt by the successor chapters during the war. And most importantly, Vulcan died, or perhaps his soul joined the Great Waaagh, or maybe my cousin Trizin has him in his collection. After that event, the Orcs remained as we see them today for millennia. However, recently, they are becoming a significant threat, gathering in a grand Waaagh that could sweep across everything and turn space green, led by Gus Kulmag Uruk-Thraker, the great Orc leader who could become a Croc, and was defeated by a Space Marine. Not a Primaries, but a Space Marine, although his from the Space Wolves, is still just a Marine. Honestly, I can't take them as a serious threat, nor should I, as they're the comic relief of Warhammer 40k, and I'm not complaining about that. Besides, Gus Kul's current design is impressive. But putting the comedy aside, all the Orc clans are uniting under Gus Kul's great Waaagh, now numbering in the billions, with a great fleet that could pose a serious threat to the Imperium and the other factions, or maybe not. Since a certain individual with uncontrollable rage killed someone special to Gus Kul, it's possible Khorne's realm may turn green. A notable feature of the Orcs, and what makes them one of the galaxy's most successful and numerous races, is their method of reproduction, like fungi. Thought it was like their Japanese cousins? Slanesh has affected too many people. But moving on, the Orcs are half animal and half fungal, meaning they have fewer vital organs. In case of severe injuries, this keeps them alive longer, like Gus Kul. They also have greater resistance to gunfire, cuts, and other forms of damage, with a high tolerance for pain, which makes inflicting harm on others fun for them. A key point is that their bodies, or more accurately, their spores, can carry an entire ecosystem capable of populating a planet, even if it's lifeless. This feature was implemented by the Old Ones as a countermeasure, so that during the War in Heaven, when the Necrons wiped out all life on conquered planets, Orcs could quickly establish armies and create a new ecosystem, an Orc ecosystem. This might have played an important role had the Old Ones won, which didn't happen, and their creations were left adrift, bringing some bad luck for the rest of the galaxy's life. Before getting sidetracked again, let's start with the stages of Orkoid growth. When an Orc invasion hits a planet and lands, or rather crashes, and spores reach the ground, the first stage begins. Once settled, the first Orkoid organisms appear, fungi. Beneath these fungi, an Orc is forming, though it will take time to develop. The first life forms to emerge are squigs, which fulfill the roles of livestock, pets, tools, as bags, paint, bombs. Some squigs explode, sharks, snakes, or face huggers for entertainment, whips, or even hair. Yes, Orcs are bald, and the hair you see is actually tiny, hair-like squigs. They even use them as ammo. Squigs are incredibly useful to the Orcs. To clarify, there isn't just one type of squig, there's a great variety with different uses. Next come the snotlings, the lowest on the Orkoid hierarchy, even below the food chain, since squigs might eat them. In the absence of squigs, Orcs can also use them as food. Though weaker and more cowardly than their superiors, they play a vital role in the early stages, farming and herding, tending to the fungi and squigs until the Gretchen and Orcs emerge, so food, drink, yes, there's mushroom beer, medicine, and ammunition are ready. In fact, there's a weapon that uses snotlings as ammo. After them come the Gretchen, who are the slave labor force. They do most of the things Orcs don't want to bother with, like gathering resources, maintaining vehicles and some weapons or structures, bringing ammo to the Orcs, and if no squigs are around, serving as food, or worse, as mine clearers on the battlefield while the Orcs laugh at the explosions. The final stage of the Orkoid cycle is the Orcs themselves, ready and eager for a good fight. As I mentioned, they are strong, resilient, and not particularly smart, unless you're the biggest and strongest. But all these qualities are focused exclusively on waging war against any being that dares to face them, or simply because they feel like fighting. One important thing to mention is that the more they battle and win, the bigger and stronger they become. How big and strong can they get? The two most outstanding examples were the Orc warlord of Ullanor, who faced Horus and even the Emperor, and the Beast, who fought Vulcan. It was later discovered there were 6 of them, and they were hard to defeat. Oh, and there's Guskull. The culture of the Orcs revolves around one single, shared idea, and only one, war. This drives vast numbers of them to band together for massive green crusades in search of a good fight, regardless of who the opponent is, even if it's themselves. These crusades are led by a chieftain, typically a warboss, who commands the others through strength and cunning. The Orkoid hierarchy is summed up as the strongest and the smartest is in charge. But to clarify further, it's structured as follows: the lowest rank in the hierarchy is the boys. They are the youngest orcs, the most common, and the backbone of any Waaagh. They are warriors whose sole purpose is to fight, loot, and follow orders from the knobs and warboss. At this stage, they are still combat novices. As they gain experience, that is, if they survive, they can choose to follow a particular clan or rise in the Orkoid hierarchy. Even at these stages, they often specialize in combat roles, such as Slugger Boys. These are orcs who prefer melee combat. Armed with a crude pistol, known as a slugger, and a handheld weapon, typically an axe or knife, called a kopar, they focus on charging in fast to get close and tear into their enemies in hand-to-hand combat. Shooter boys, these are the boys who engage enemies from a short distance, using a larger, more powerful orc firearm known as a shooter. While orcs aren't known for accuracy, they make up for it with sheer volume of fire. Oddboyz, boys who manage to survive and gain combat experience, can obtain heavier armor than typical orcs, usually made from salvaged pieces of destroyed vehicles or crafted by McBoys. Their armor grants them greater resilience in battle and allows them to wield better or larger weapons. Stormboys, these orcs see themselves as more disciplined than the usual boys. They use jetpacks to launch themselves into battle, allowing them to move quickly across the battlefield. Known for their more organized tactics, they fly over the field, descending upon the enemy from above and landing amid their ranks with their jetpacks. Tank busters, these are orcs obsessed with blowing up tanks and war vehicles. They specialize in destroying enemy vehicles, often armed with powerful explosives and anti-tank weaponry. Burner boys, these orcs prefer using incendiary weapons. Equipped with flamethrowers, they specialize in burning anything and everything in their path. There may be other special ties due to the orcs' continuous growth and evolution, but these are the most widely known. However, the Orkoid hierarchy doesn't stop there. Some orcs don't fit into common categories and are called Oddboyz, serving secondary yet essential roles. These include slavers, tasked with controlling the Gretchen, snotlings, or any species they capture. Slavers train and direct them to work efficiently. McBoys, the engineers and mechanics of orc society. They have an innate knowledge of technology and are responsible for building and repairing vehicles, weapons, and machinery for the orc horde. Though their technology may look chaotic and crude, the orcs' belief in its effectiveness, along with the psychic Waaagh field, makes it function surprisingly well. Pain boys, the doctors and surgeons among the orcs, though their medicine is brutally direct and devoid of compassion. They treat injured orcs and also perform surgical experiments, creating cyborgs, orcs with cybernetic parts. Despite their rough methods, orcs generally survive due to their incredible physical resilience. Weird boys, the orc psychers. These orcs act as living conduits of Waaagh energy, absorbing the psychic power generated by the masses of orcs around them. The more orcs nearby, the more powerful they become, but this also makes them dangerous, as they can explode or release uncontrollable destructive energy if they absorb too much. When their heads explode for this reason, it often draws hearty laughter from the other orcs. An interesting aspect of these vast green tides, or Orkoid societies, is the existence of clans, or rather, schools of thought, that are not strictly defined and can vary from orc to orc. However, once an orc decides on a clan, they stick with it for life, never switching allegiance. Here are the primary clans. Gorfs, known for being the biggest and most brutal, they are passionate about melee combat. Gorfs love to get up close and personal with their enemies, relishing the thrill of brutal hand-to-hand fights. Bad Moons, the wealthiest orcs. The Bad Moons have the best gear because their biology allows them to grow teeth, the orc currency, faster than others. This wealth fuels their constant acquisition of top-notch equipment and flashy displays. Evil Sons, obsessed with speed. Evil Sons prefer charging into battle aboard fast vehicles. They believe that the faster they go, the better, making them the clan with the most bikes, trucks, and speed-crazed orcs. Death Skulls, renowned as looters and thieves. Death Skulls are masters of scavenging. They are known for repainting stolen goods in their clan colors to claim them as their own, taking pride in repurposing battlefield scraps and salvaged items. Blood Axes, the most tactical and strategic of the clans, by Orc standards, Blood Axes often engage in planning and may even cooperate with humans if it benefits them. They sometimes employ unconventional tactics, even using cover and camouflage, a rare sight among Orcs. Viper Bites, these are those Orcs who prefer the old school or rather the Warhammer of fantasy. Orcs are renowned for their improvised, chaotic technology, which often incorporates scrap metal and salvaged parts from other species, somehow managing to make it work even if they don't truly understand how it functions. This stems from an innate, genetically encoded knowledge that intensifies as a Waaagh Orc war campaign grows in strength, as seen with legendary Waaghs, like Ullanor and the Beast. Orc technology works only for them. If someone else attempts to use it, there's a 50-50 chance it won't work or will outright explode. Orc vehicles are a mix of functional scrap, often held together by random wires and seemingly haphazard components. Their spaceships, for instance, even have ventilation windows to let the heat out in space. Oddboyz, the Orc engineers, are responsible for creating and maintaining Orc technology. They are seen as a blend of engineers and shamans, harnessing the power of the Waaagh to ensure their creations function. This unique energy allows them to build and maintain machinery in ways that would defy logic for other species, turning their chaotic inventions into surprisingly formidable assets on the battlefield. Yes, Orcs do possess psychic powers, although not actively like the Elder or the Liberians of the Space Marines. Instead, they wield it passively, often without realizing it. This power comes from their imagination, or more precisely, their belief that something will work. If they believe something functions, it will. They even apply this belief to colors. Red makes things faster, black makes them tougher, yellow enhances explosions, blue brings luck, and purple grants invisibility. Ever seen a purple orc? Exactly. Of course, green is the best color of all, and perhaps that's why Vulcan defeated the beast by being. Additionally, the larger the Waaagh, and the more Orcs gathered together, the stronger their collective belief becomes, which unlocks greater knowledge and more impressive feats. A prime example of this are Stompus, colossal Orc constructs that can rival, or even surpass, the size of Imperial Titans. During the Waaagh of the Beast, they managed to build attack moons or Orkoid Death Stars, and there were dozens of these. Active psychic powers also exist, particularly among weird boys, although they have no control over them. Weird boys typically release bursts of green energy at anything in their path. If they fail to do so, they'll explode along with anything in their vicinity. The psychic energy grows exponentially with the number of Orcs around, making it both a weapon and a hazard. This volatile sneak force from the Waaagh truly makes Orcs an unpredictable yet devastating power in the galaxy. Believe it or not, Orcs do have gods, just two, Gork and Mork. Gork is the more brutal of the two, embodying sheer strength and direct melee combat. Gork is said to be brutal but cunning, meaning he's as crafty as he is powerful when he attacks. This god personifies unrestrained aggression and the mindset of smashing through anything in the way. Orcs who worship Gork typically favor direct combat, physical power, and pure brutality. Mork, on the other hand, is cunning but brutal, meaning he's clever but still violent. While both gods are aggressive and powerful, Mork is more strategic, relying on tactics and deception before unleashing his fury. This god represents ambush, trickery, and unpredictable tactics, though always with an underlying forcefulness. Orcs devoted to Mork tend to be more strategic and sneaky in their approach, although in the end, they still aim to annihilate their foes. These gods are pure representations of Orcish nature in their eternal conflict, and they even sometimes fight against other gods. Gork and Mork protect Orcs from the influence of Chaos gods, channeling all Orc actions and emotions toward themselves. On rare occasions, some young Orcs may be tempted to follow other gods, like Khorne or Nurgle, but this is quite unusual. The Orcs are one of the most fascinating and iconic races in Warhammer 40k, evoking a Mad Max vibe with their wildly creative approach to waging war with anything and everything at their disposal. Yet, they should never be underestimated, as they are truly made for war, becoming stronger and smarter the more they are fought. And, let's be honest, just look at their weapons and ships, who wouldn't want one? Even so, they remain the comic relief of Warhammer 40k, which I don't mind at all. I'll admit, they are one of my favorite fact irons, alongside the Necrons and the Toe. Maybe I'll dive into those in the future. So here we reach the end, or rather, the beginning, since each of the sections I've covered here could easily warrant a video of its own. With that, we wrap up this overview, and if the Omnicia permits, I'll expand on each of these topics in upcoming videos. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which clan you choose. See you next time.